Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the May 2024 LAPPG meeting. We are here for RX Goes to 11. Yes, we are at RX 11. It's so exciting, and I have to thank iZotope by Native Instruments for giving LAPPG this one of the first looks, public looks at this brand new, hot off the press as of yesterday software. So Mike Rozett is a product leader with more than 20 years, lots of 20s here, 20 years of experience creating, developing, and launching products and content for professionals, consumers, viewers, and listeners. Mike is the principal product manager for RX, so I imagine that means he's had no sleep for a couple weeks now. And under his leadership, RX won a scientific and technical Oscar in 2020 and an engineering Emmy in 2019. Prior to that, he was a producer in Boston and a writer-producer working on a History Channel series, Tougher in Alaska, which must have been very cool to work on. And then just background, Mike received his MBA from the F.W. Allen Graduate School of Business at Babson College and his master's degree in history from Vassar College. So welcome back. It's good to see you.
Hey, everyone. I'm just watching the chat. It's amazing the range of countries and representation here. So it's really cool to see that. And thanks for taking time out of your respective days to spend it with us. I think we all really appreciate that. The very quick intro, and then I really do want to dive into the demo, is that, as mentioned, it's been about 20 months since RX10, and in that time, the market has changed dramatically. There's so much more sort of artificial intelligence and machine learning in products now used, and I think maybe some questionable ways, but I'm more talking about exciting ways where people are really figuring out in their companies what they can do with this technology. We've had machine learning in RX really since RX6, and of course, as we're talking about RX11 now, and our iZotope's had machine learning since a little bit before that. But it's always been a tool that's there, to be in service of folks who are trying to make great projects and to do really great work. So one of our biggest themes for RX11 was to really upgrade the machine learning in a number of places, and I'll show you where we did that. And then also to go back and do some updates to processing that, some of which we haven't touched recently. And then also we started to really dig in on audio random access. And I can show you sort of the initial stage of that, or actually it's stage 2 of what we've done, the second phase. But there's more of that sort of coming down the road. So I'm going to show a little bit of that and kind of tease that as well. I think the first place to start, though, is over on the website, just to give folks a sense of what we're kind of announcing and showing. So as I did last time, I wanted to mention that there's a ton of information on our site, and it's everything from pricing to features to comparing the 3 different versions of RX that we have. And just to kind of scroll through this very quickly, there's a lot of new content that also talks through how to use some of these new features. And then here, because people usually ask us about this is sort of the pricing grid that we have for brand new customers. So if you've never purchased from us and you're just showing up to iZotope and Native Instruments for the first time, Elements is on sale for $49. It has 6 plugins. It does not have the standalone audio editor. RX Standard and Advanced, they both do have the standalone editor, and they each have a respective collection of plugins. Just looking at my numbers here, Standard is up to 18 plugins in addition to the standalone editor, and RX 11 Advanced is up to 20 plugins now. So just a quick shout out on for the website and for the information and tutorials and all that kind of stuff. But now, let me jump out of here, and I want to get us back over back to, I should say, RX. So I'm just checking my settings. Looks like we're good to go. And so here we are now in RX11. And the first place I want us to start is with Dialog Isolate. Most of you know Dialog Isolate. This also, actually dating myself, when I started at RX6, but going back to RX6, Dialog Isolate came out, and it was one of the first pieces of processing in RX to use machine learning. And so now we're a few generations down the road. I think I could probably call this the third generation of sort of neural nets. So we have an entirely new neural net in Dialog Isolate that also allows us to run in real time in very low latency. So I'm showing you the RX audio editor just for demo purposes, but keep in mind that there is now a standalone version of Dialog Isolate that runs in real time. And that can be incredibly useful, depending on the projects that you're working on. So what I want to do is just play some noisy audio and do some pretty aggressive settings, because those translate best over demos, just to kind of show you how strong it is at pulling out reverb and noise. I'm running this in the good/real-time mode. This is the same mode that would run in the plugin, to kind of give you a sense of that. And also, it's going to run faster than the high-quality mode. The high-quality mode will take more time. It's not as great for demos because it needs to use a lot of horsepower. It's one of the reasons we were asking that poll, to just kind of see what computers people are on these days. Because as more companies and more products move towards machine learning and various versions of artificial intelligence, the CPU becomes very important. The horsepower you've got in your computer really makes a difference. So going to leave it here for a moment and hit preview, and then I'm going to move the sliders to just give you a sense of what this net can do in the good/real-time mode.
Improv is acting without a script.
So you'll hear the background noise.
The main rule of improv is yes and, which means that you agree with what the person tells you and you add to
very
it.
abrupt. Here it is before.
It's also a great skill for learning how to pivot on the spot.
And after.
Think
and I'm using this quite aggressively.
Think creatively, team
Same
build,
with now pulling out
and
the
all
reverb.
those things that we need in our real lives as well. When you work with others and
here's
you
after,
work
go back to
off of
before.
their ideas, not only is it fun and stress busting, but it's calm.
So one of the advantages of having this new net is it has allowed us to bring in de-reverb, or I should be more specific, dialogue de-reverb tech. As most of you know, you've probably seen that we have that as a separate, or used to have that as a separate module, sort of on the right-hand side. So we got rid of that and brought dialogue de-reverb into Dialog Isolate. And so now you've got these three sliders that you can play with. You can choose to de-reverb and denoise at the same time. You could do one or the other, that's up to you. And you can also do the inverse if you wanted to, is get rid of the voice, for example, and leave reverb and noise if you wanted to create other tracks, so that you could do sort of a mini mix between isolated voice and then the original background sound, and maybe even some of the noise if that might be something that you'd ultimately want to mix back in but have a lot of control over. And then this is what the view would look like for standard. This is the first time we've included Dialog Isolate in standard. But for advanced users, we've got a special panel here, and there's this little discursive arrow that if you click on it, it brings up an interface, a multi-band interface that allows you to really fine-tune your de-reverbing and your denoising, again, both at the same time or individually, depending on what's more useful to your use case. But you can dial them in depending on what your needs are. So once you've set levels here, let's say you're bringing reverb and noise down, well, the processing that you're setting here is now able to be set in 4 different levels. So if you had, let's say, a reverb that was kind of boomy in the low end, you might want to present about 100% of the processing you've set in your de-reverb and your denoising section. And maybe you want to bring some of these other bands and really focus on the low end. But if your high end was sounding pretty good, or you didn't want to go as aggressively there, you could dial that back a little bit and pull down the processing that was being applied at that point. And conversely, if you were feeling like you've got issues on the extremes and not so much in the middle, then move your crossover points and focus on the bands on either end to do that sort of fine-tuning of the work. So this is something that we're really hoping is going to be very, very useful for folks, particularly in really professional settings, who are maybe getting, audio that ranges the gamut from, reverb that isn't standard, for example, like maybe there's a really bizarre space that something was recorded in, or there's noise that is really prevalent in the mids, but not so much in the highs and lows. You can use this interface to dial that in to your heart's content. So that is what I wanted to show with Dialog Isolate. I can't see just because of the nature of my single screen here at the moment. Go ahead.
I'm gonna pop in if that's okay.
Yes.
This is from Stephanie LeBeau. Can you solo the bands in Dialog Isolate?
Yes, you can. Let me just see if I can do this live with the horsepower that I have. Actually, I'm sorry, Stephanie. No, you can't solo the you can't really solo these individual bands. My brain went to Music Rebalance where we do have solo buttons. I apologize for that. No, for Dialogue Isolate, you don't. We don't have separate solos for these bands. That's in Music Rebalance, which I'll show you in a moment. So sorry about the confusion there.
No problem. And this Melissa Hoffman is asking, please play a demo of Voice Remove.
I think we could do that. Let me go back to preview mode and see how we do on that.
Improv is acting without a script.
It's going to take a moment to run the horsepower.
The main rule of improv is yes, which means that you agree with.
There we go.
The person tells you and you add to it. It's also.
So this is a good example of if you're not demoing live on Zoom and you've got an M series machine, you should be okay. But you can use this to take voice out, and it will vary a little bit. One of the things about voice is if you really want to take it out all the way, you should probably also take out the reverb along with it, which is not going to demo particularly well with pulling these two sliders down on a neural net. Again, with this older computer on Zoom, but it's something you could do on a faster machine. And it's also something you could just do ahead of time to render, for example, and see. But you should be able to get a pretty clean voiceless version. And your mileage will vary depending on how that voice is bleeding, but voice and reverb should help you get that kind of a setting to really pull it out. So let's talk about dialogue contour. This is sort of a dialogue fine-tuning tool that we've actually added some much broader parameters to. So it actually was probably still good for really fine-tuning dialogue, but also can take you now into the area of sound design, or if you were working on a character voice. And I'll show you that in a moment. But if you're new to it, let me just spend a quick moment showing you what you can do, and then I'll show you some of the new controls. So with dialogue contour, the idea here is that you can shape the pitch and the intonation of anything from a syllable or a beat or a small section up to an entire track. So all you have to do, for example, if you want to do something small, is make a selection, and it will populate into dialogue contour. And then you have this pitch contour line that you can put nodes on. And then with those nodes, you can use it to essentially redraw the pitch. I'm going down, but you could also go up of a particular syllable. So in this case, there is a read. The first word is please. It kind of goes up in pitch. And what I'm doing, and again, I've done this a bunch of times to show you this in a particular way, is I want to bring it down and kind of show you the before or after. But again, this curve works in any direction and any shape you want. And it is also available, this curve smoothing is available to kind of smooth out. So you don't have something that's so jagged and linear or geometric. You can make things a little bit smoother. I will just leave it kind of in a blunt mode for now. So listen to the first word.
Please listen carefully as your menu. Please listen carefully as your menu.
And then the original was.
Please listen carefully as your menu. Please listen carefully as your.
So the original has an upward inflection. I've changed it to be a downward.
Please listen carefully as your menu. Please listen carefully.
And it's a pretty subtle change. I'm hoping it's actually coming across on Zoom. But when we designed this originally, this is what dialogue editors had said to us. They said, look, give us control over the subtlety of shaping a read or shaping intonation. And we did that initially with this. But then we decided that it was time to add some additional controls that can also be used subtly, but you can also push them. And let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm putting the entire selection in. I'm resetting the curve to 0. And now I'm focusing on these 3 controls down here. These are global controls. So you can still target a global control to a tiny little section if you want to select that, and it will pop up in the dialog contour window. Or in this case, I've selected the entire clip because I want to be sort of broad strokes with this demo to show you what you can do here. So I put it in preview mode, and the first thing I'm going to do is play with the pitch.
Please listen carefully as our menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours. Please listen carefully as our menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours.
It's formant.
Please listen carefully as our menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours. Please listen carefully as our menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours.
And formant's new with this release, as is variation. Variation, we could have also called it an expressivity control. When you push variation upwards, all the way at the top of the range, it will do twice as much variation in the pitch that's already in the recording. If you push it down to the bottom of the range, it pushes the recording towards monotone. Now, all of these, and I'll show this in just a sec, all of these controls have very wide ranges. So at their extremes, they are probably pretty crazy, like you probably wouldn't use them. Dialogue editors, you're probably going to stay within, the sort of smaller semitone range and make fine adjustments. If you were in the sound design world and you were making a character voice, for example, something for animation, or if you were creating a new kind of voice for maybe a character in gaming, you might want to push these controls a little bit further. So here's variation. I'll go a little extreme.
Carefully as our menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours.
And then down to
Please
monotone.
listen carefully as our menu options have changed. Your time in queue is 4 hours. Please listen carefully as our...
So we're excited about this because it does give you, more control over your audio. Our notes for dialogue editors and folks working on sort of straight ahead dialogue apply subtly, really use your ears to fine tune things in here. And if you're working more on the creative character voice side or something like that, definitely take it further and kind of see what you can do there. Dialogue contour is often used in sort of two settings. One of them is to shape the kinds of things we're talking about within a track or within a segment like I was showing here. The other thing we designed it for is folks who have got multiple edits, the kind of Franken edit situation where you've got a performance from, let's say it's the same actor on the same day in the same room with the same mic, but you've got different reads, and the energy and the inflection between those different takes doesn't match in the, I should say, in the edits and the snippets that you have. And so you can also fine tune between takes and try to get things to match. If a word was going upwards and then comes in downwards, you can kind of shape it so that the inflection matches before and after the edit and do that kind of stuff. I think, Wendy, I'll pause here and just see if anybody has any initial questions on this one.
Yes. Okay. So in Dialogue Contour, does the orange line update in real time or only after processing? This is from Mike Wax.
Good question. I'm glad you mentioned that because I probably should have mentioned that. The orange line shows any change you're about to make and then also any change you render against the original, which is the gray line up there. So I'm doing kind of wacky extreme things. I think you can see this. But so this is showing, the orange again is showing what I'm doing. And then we've analyzed what the pitch curve is when this audio was first opened up, and that's the gray line. And so that's your reference point. If you're looking at an area, for example, this area, you might think, oh, maybe this is a little bit flat here. Maybe I want to do something more dramatic there to push that up. You can do that. So again, it reflects what you're about to do in the orange line, and then it reflects what you've done once you hit render.
Does the module apply the same effect on both left and right, or it's actually reading both sides and calculating two outcomes?
That's a good question. I'm showing this in stereo mode just because it's sort of easier than switching back and forth. This is really optimized for dialogue, which is typically mono, typically a single track. So I think we can interpolate stereo for these tracks, but generally, probably the safest and the best use case is to be thinking of this as a use case, even though, again, I'm up in stereo here, is thinking of using it in mono. That's probably going to give you the best results. Two things I'd like to show you with the same audio example. We've gotten a lot of requests over the years for a mid-side mode, and we finally put one in. So let me show you the path to finding it. You have to go up to View, go to Channel Mode, and you can see I'm currently, as I just mentioned, in left-right mode. You can click mid-side, And this is really new for us. And this works only, this isn't in any plugin version. It really works here in the standalone editor, only in the standalone editor in this main window. But what's nice about this is if you've got, for example, a stereo vocal stem, and the vocals are really panned hard center, in the mid channel, and the backing vocals are really, hard left and right, which would be the side channel. If you want, you can target processing to either side of that. So for example, if I play this, let me just give you a sense of this audio first. So here's just mid or center. And here are the sides. So in this case, let's imagine in the mid channel where the lead vocal is, the vocal had issues with breathiness, for example. You could make a selection. I'm going to do something really aggressive and not subtle. You could select this part of the vocal, turn off the sides, and target your processing just here or anywhere you want within this track, or both tracks. If you had a problem, do that again, and you can have both, or you can just target it to the sides. And this is great for stems. Like, let's say you had a stereo stem of mixed drums, a drum kit, and the snare is typically in that center channel. If that snare was overly reverbed or there were transients that you needed to get control over, you could again select the mid channel, focus your processing there, and then export it back out as a stereo track, and then use that stem in the context of a mix. Those of you who are also doing restoration work on old stereo masters or something that's been transferred, this is a nice way to get control over whatever is, landing in the center channel, and whatever is kind of landing in the sides. So that is new for us. I'm going to take it out of this mode before I forget and put it back in left-right to then talk about Music Rebalance. Music Rebalance also has a brand new net, totally different from the Dialogue Isolate net that we're using. And this net is all about high quality, but does not have a real-time mode. So I just want to be clear about that. This is one of those situations where if you're creating stems or you're remixing within an existing track, we've got 3 modes, good, better, best, and it's really about needing the processing need a little bit of time to render this in very high quality. So to, demo this, I've already rendered the stems because I just want to show you or play for you what they sound like. So as you can see pretty clearly, vocal, bass, and drums are the 3 sort of truly individual stems, and then other is the catch-all for things that don't fit into the first 3. And while I'm thinking of it, we have mute buttons, so you can, listen to any combination of the 4. This is where we have solo buttons. This is also processing where a faster machine will give you a better result with preview. And if you wanted to preview, you would put it probably in best mode, get a sense of, how you wanted to treat the tracks, do a combination of soloing and muting. And then, as always, if you wanted to essentially remix a stereo or a mono file without even generating stems, you can, reset your levels here, sort of test it out in preview, audition it there, and then hit render, and it will generate a file for you based on essentially what you just remixed without needing to have the stems in advance. So what I've done, just for demo purposes, is everything is basically set flat when you go to stem split, and it just outputs at sort of a fixed level the 4 stems. So let's do this. I'll play the original. I know you just heard it, but let me just give you a little bit more context again. I think you did it to yourself. And so pre-rendered is the vocal stem. I think you did it to yourself. And here is the bass. And I'll jump to percussion. This is actually the same as drums. And finally, just for completion here, here's other instruments. So I just wanted to give you all of those as sort of reference points for what this can do. Some folks also use this to try to remove music behind dialogue. It wasn't truly designed to do that. So as you've heard me say earlier, your mileage will vary. It's going to be sort of up to your situation, whether that's going to work or not. But I've gotten a lot of very positive response for people who have used this to actually pull music down underneath, for example, a conversation that's happening in a scene. So you can still keep the music in the background, but you can also get more isolation on the vocals. So it's worth trying in some situations. It's truly an off-book use for us, but it has worked for folks, and I've heard gotten some nice feedback around that. Folks have asked us over the years about being able to split dialogue, music, and effects. And there are some folks out there, a couple of companies who are already doing a version of that. That one is actually trickier than it sounds because you'd be surprised at how close effects and music can be at times. Think about, let's say you're working on a police show. A gunshot in a soundtrack sounds a lot like a snare hit. And so when you're training, your neural nets, when you're using these data sets, lots and lots of examples of sound effects and thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, you've got to make sure that you're really training on audio that covers that wide spectrum of sound. And sound effects can also be tonal, and they can be musical. And music sometimes is very staccato and sounds like a sound effect. So the companies that are doing this have access to massive data sets, which sometimes are hard to acquire and can be expensive. So I'm hoping we can get to that version down the road. But for right now, we're more focused on the things that I've showed you in the dialogue and de-reverb side and kind of the music rebalance side.
So this is a question, I'm not quite sure this is the right place for it. If I use RX Connect to send one full music file from the DAW to RX editor and do the stem split, will I be able to export all the stems back to my DAW, for example, Pro Tools?
Yes, when we do stem split, you can see it puts it out as 4 different tabs. Trying to remember what that setting is. You should be able to go back, all 4 stems should be able to go back through RX Connect. Can't off the top of my head remember if you need to set something differently there. But yes, we should be supporting that. So this is it's actually a recording by one of my colleagues in the band that he's in. And we're using this to demo 2 things. We've got a new feature called Streaming Preview. And that allows you to, well, in this case, see, but also hear, of course, how your music's going to sound on a particular streaming service. So this is new, and it's also paired with something called Loudness Optimize, and I'm going to sort of tell the story of how they work together in a moment. But let's start with Streaming Preview, which I always slip up on that. Streaming Preview. So we have a list of presets that allow you to select from a bunch of the sort of the top streaming services. And for demo purposes, we've been tending to grab a Spotify, what's the very high quality setting. And you can see that there's a -14 LUFS or LUF setting, particular codec of OGG, and high quality. And so here's an original song that's been mastered. And then I'm going to show you what happens when you run it through Streaming Preview. So 2 things. There's a quiet intro, and then I'm going to jump to a louder verse. So be ready for the louder verse. And this is loud for a reason, because this is mastered to be right up there, at the top of the scale. And then you're going to see what happens when it gets put through Streaming Preview and what it's going to sound like when it's on Spotify. So quiet intro here. So real dynamic range coming when you get to the verse. I'm just going to play a short snippet of this. So hopefully I didn't blow anyone's ears out on that. So I've pre-rendered the Spotify very high quality codec, and this is what it looks like when it gets rendered. So it's pretty obvious to see from before and after that a lot has happened here to bring this down to -14 LUFS. So we've got loudness normalization happening to meet the standards that Spotify has, and we've also got a codec that's being applied. So the difference, I won't play the original again because you just heard it, but the difference is pretty pronounced. Much more quiet in the intro. And the verse still has volume, but it's really come down. And so you're probably thinking, okay, so that's sad. I know that. What can I do about it? Well, here's the part 2 of this that my colleagues built in conjunction with Streaming Preview. We now have something called Loudness Optimize. And what Loudness Optimize does is it basically analyzes how much of your audio has been fed into the integrated LUFS measurement, the normalization loudness that most streaming services are using. And so if I bring Loudness Optimize up, the first thing it does is it runs an analysis pass against this audio. So again, this is the audio that we've now run through Streaming Preview. So now this is what this would sound like at the very high quality setting for Spotify. So I'm running Loudness Optimize on the Streaming Preview version of the song. And the first thing it tells me is that only 86% of this music is being measured. And that's kind of interesting. And you're thinking, well, doesn't integrated LUFS measure everything? It does not. There is a gate in integrated LUFS at about minus 10 dB. And everything below that gate, this gray material we're showing below the dashed line, is quieter material and does not get counted. And what ends up happening if you have something with, this is not the largest dynamic range, but there is a dynamic range. But things that have a dynamic range that aren't all at the same loudness, a lot of that quiet material is excluded. And that ends up having you end up having, frankly, a louder master. And then when it gets to Spotify, they're going to knock down what's loud and push it so that it's quieter. So what my colleagues figured out was if you are able to get a handle on this lower material and bring it above the gate using, this will look familiar to you, the settings of upwards compression, only the quiet sections get raised by upwards compression. They rise above the gate. They get counted in the LUFS, integrated LUFS calculation. And then when Spotify gets it, they don't lower it as much because it doesn't present as loud. And so the net of this is your perceived loudness goes up when you apply this. So let me show you this rather than just talking about it. So here we are. This is the Streaming Preview alone version. And then pre-rendered, you would hit the Learn button and we'd give you some suggestions. When we jump over here to this version, watch the Loudness Optimize go from 86% measured to 99% measured. And you'll notice there's nothing below the gate, nothing below that dotted line. But the cool thing about this is it's going to play back louder. But if you look at your minus 14 integrated LUFS in this file where we've Loudness Optimized and you go back to the Streaming Preview, you'll see that it's still 14 LUFS. So we've managed to raise the quiet sections into the loudness calculation. Your perceived loudness is hotter, but you still hit that same spec. So here's how it would actually sound. Here's the Streaming Preview version. I'll do 2 selections. Here's the intro, the guitar part again. And here it is after Loudness Optimize. So significantly louder, and you can see that it's louder just in the spectrogram. And same with the verse. The verse doesn't change as dramatically because the verse was never below the gate to begin with, but it plays back at this level. And after Loudness Optimize, it's at this level. So for the hotter material, the louder material, it's only about a 5 dB gain that you get. But the quieter intro, that can be 2, 3, 4 dB that you're pushing up. And again, the key part about this is you're still meeting the LUFS standard that Spotify has, but you're doing it in a way that's going to sound louder to folks who are actually listening on Spotify. And it helps you maintain some of the loudness that you were trying to set and gives you a little bit more control over how your audio will be heard and played back. The one other thing I want to mention, which won't show up here because these audio examples need Loudness Optimize, we don't force Loudness Optimize in situations where it won't help. So if you had something that we ran this analysis on and it showed up as already being, 95, 96, 97% measured, most of the time in those cases, we'll just say to you, hey, you know what? You're already in good shape. There's nothing you need to run Loudness Optimize for. Don't worry about it. You're good to go. Ship it will to your streaming services and leave the audio alone, essentially. So Wendy, I realize there was a lot of loudness discussion. I'm going to pause there and just see if folks have questions.
If you raise the perceived loudness in this module, does it keep the original true peak or does that also raise?
That's a good question. I think the peak might raise. I'm not quite sure because I don't think let's put it this way, let me answer it sort of backwards. If doing that raised the true peak and it threw off your LUFS, we would block it. We wouldn't let that come through. So I think my understanding is your peaks might rise, but it's still going to keep you in integrated LUFS, and you shouldn't have anything that distorts, if that's kind of what you're getting at. All right. So the last thing is a sample that I just want to talk about in terms of Repair Assistant. It's possible that my thumbnail is blocking the top right. I'm not sure, but if you were to go all the way to the top right of the standalone editor, there's a button called Repair Assistant. So if you can't see it, and maybe you can, I'm just describing it. But you click on Repair Assistant top right, and it brings this out. And for folks who aren't familiar with it, this is the third version of Repair Assistant. We brought in a bunch of machine learning to this processing now. You'll recognize some of the denoise and de-reverb here. And the point of Repair Assistant is to work for both people who are absolutely new to RX and don't know how to get a result quickly. All you have to do is basically pick voice or music, depending on what your audio is. And voice, by the way, is spoken word and dialogue and VO. It's also isolated sung vocals. And then instrument or music is mixed, mixed songs, and it's individual instruments. We've got slightly different settings for these two things, but you pick your mode, you click learn, we do an analysis pass of what you have, and then we set the controls in these 4 quadrants. And then you can play back pretty quickly and get a starting point. If you like what we've suggested, you can hit render and move on. And if you want to modify what we've done, you can move the controls to your heart's content. I've pre-rendered a couple of examples also just for demo purposes, but here's the original. This is a vocal track with a lot of background noise.
Calls me rough around the edges. I don't think that it's a compliment. I'm sure you'd rather have a nice girl.
So if I were to then click learn, we would come up with this. Watch the sort of the spectrogram. You'll see sort of the fuzzy broadband noise disappearing, and you'll see a lot more dark space as we clear up stuff between the vocals and also stuff underneath the vocals. So that's what it would have done just by clicking learn. Pick voice, click learn. In 10 seconds, you have a new result, which sounds like this.
Calls me rough around the edges.
So here's the original.
I don't think that it's a compliment. I'm sure you'd rather have a nice
Here's suggested.
girl. I think I'd rather drop dead.
And when I listen back to this, I'm still hearing some noise. And so what I did, again, pre-rendered, was I dialed up the denoising. I think I pulled back the de-reverb a little bit because I liked some of that sound. You can also play around with the tone if you want to push it to be a little bit more edgy and present. You can go this way. If you want it to be a little warmer and more muted, go this way. There's de-essing settings, etc. And so then I just did a couple of renders myself, another render. And you can see that there's much more isolation. So just by visually, and I'll play this in just a sec, here's the original, and here's where we ended up after the middle pass of the learn being run by Repair Assistant and then me tweaking it a little bit. So here's where we ended up.
Calls me rough around the edges.
Back to the original.
I don't think that it's a compliment. I'm sure you'd rather have a nice girl. I think I'd rather drop dead.
So the one other thing I would say about this that I want to point out is Repair Assistant is available in all 3 versions. As in Elements is just simply standalone plugin, and then in Standard and Advanced, it's both a standalone plugin, but also in the module like I'm showing you here today. It's in the standalone editor. The Advanced version has something that's pretty useful for folks who are going to use this in situations that recur pretty regularly. So imagine you were working in a podcast situation or in a voiceover situation where it's usually the same person on the same microphone in the same background setting. You can open up Module Chain, and Module Chain has all of the settings that are currently in these quadrants in Repair Assistant. And if you like your settings here, you can name this and save this and bring this back up every time you have the same audio. If you make any changes here, for those of you familiar with Module Chain, they will be reflected over here. You can change the order if you want to move around where the order in which things are processing if you think you have a better order than what we suggested. But you can save this and you can continue to use it over and over again on sort of repetitive audio situations or situations where you can pretty much anticipate what the problems are going to be. So learn here, get your knowledge here, fine tune it, bring it into module chain. Then the next time that it comes up, you can just hit the ground running with module chain. Now, those of you who work with the software for many years, you know you can just set your module chain anytime, any place you want. You don't need Repair Assistant for it. But for folks who are moving quickly or who are new to the software, it's kind of a nice way to get yourself set up to move pretty quickly and efficiently. The one thing I will mention without showing, because I know we're getting short on time, is we've been working a lot with audio random access, as I mentioned before. And so we already have that available in Logic, and we have a new version for Logic, but we are working and very, very close on a version of what we're calling Spectral Editor for Pro Tools and also Studio One. So I can't give you an exact date, but I'm just going to say, and truly, we're very close on that, and that's going to be released soon. And for anyone who's bought RX 11, that will be a free upgrade, or maybe I should say a free patch. You'll get that for free, and you'll be able to then use 5 pieces of our processing, which are replace, attenuate, gain, declick, and dehum. Those will appear in a plugin that, the beauty of ARA or Audio Random Access, the plugin appears to be right in your timeline, and you can just grab it there. You don't have to shuttle audio back and forth between RX. You don't have to use 4 or 5 plugins. You can use this single one. When you make changes, they propagate to your timeline, and it's a really nice way to go. And it's something that we're really digging in more deeply on, and there'll be more to talk about and more to see very soon. And with that, Wendy, I will stop.
Okay, all right, very nice. Let's do lightning round. So Bill Dawson wants to know, is there a de-distortion?
There is not specifically, but I'm going to say great request, and there should be. It's something that we sort of have on our backlog to think about doing, but we don't have anything specific for that at this point.
Okay, so this is from Gary Robinson. On the iZotope website, it doesn't list Avid Media Composer or Magix Vegas under the NLEs compatible with RX 11. Will it work with either or both?
We, at the moment, don't officially support either of those 2 NLEs. I think that the truth is Media Composer works fairly well because we do so much work with Avid and Pro Tools, but it is sort of its own, I'm going to say beast. It's its own sort of version. So at the moment, I can't say we officially support it, but it's, from what we can tell right now, it's working fairly well with RX.
Okay. And then here's a question from Wilfred. Sound designers are very concerned because iZotope did drop their favorite tools like Iris 2. Any plans to integrate it into RX?
Yeah, first of all, I know some folks weren't happy with that. I appreciate that note. There's definitely some work happening now on some additional creative tools, but just to be really transparent, there's no plan to pull Iris into RX at this point. But I think it's likely that some of that processing will make it into some other things down the road, and that's probably all I can say about that.
Okay. And thank you. And then Ruth Edelman said, would be cool to have a network/streaming service preview for series television broadcast and or streaming services. Is this something like that? And is there something like that in the future to demo to clients how different services change the mixes?
Yeah, great request. We've actually, once we we initially started Loudness Optimize as a music story, and we're getting, and I really appreciate this, a lot of input on, hey, where can you take this for, TV and film? The only standard we have in there that works for anything in the video world is YouTube. That's it for now. Yes, we're gonna bring that in down the road. We obviously don't have that right now at launch. That's something that's going to come later.
Okay, and here's just a quick one on the 10-day free, offer. Can I try it on One Audio? And is there a student discount? I'm not sure what the first part means, but do you guys have a student discount?
We do. There's an educational, there's a student discount. If you have a valid ID, you show it and you can get a discount. There's also, of course, educational institution discounts as well for those folks. I didn't quite understand the trial question, but it is a 10-day trial for all of our stuff, and you can try things there and then convert over if you want to buy the product.
Okay, cool. And just following up on Ryan Coda, who asked or who brought something up a little while ago. It says, once they have both aligned the lav to boom, it would be great to throw both of them into dialogue contour. So I think that was just sort of the follow-up to our discussion about that. And let me see if there's any more. We answered that. And okay. Mark Jensen says, thank you for your presentation. Recently, voice synthesis tools like Adobe Podcast Enhance or DX Revive have been game changers. We'd love to see iZotope go in this direction.
Also a really great request. There's definitely stuff happening in the company with generative AI right now. I don't have anything that I can kind of announce immediately with voice synthesis, but that's definitely something we are actively looking at, and I think you can probably expect some stuff down the road, but nothing to really tease or share yet.
Got it. And here's one. Does the Dialogue Isolate DAW plugin introduce any latency?
It's super low latency. I think it's 100 samples or roughly around that. So we're treating that as truly as real time. But again, you've got to use that good real time mode. If you switch to the if you were to try to use the other mode, you would not get anything close to real time performance.
And here's another question. I know that sound designers and parts ignore iZotope because Native Instruments drop absinthe. Will absinthe come back?
That is something I am literally not qualified to speak on. I don't know what the plans are for that. So I'm going to say I don't know and not try to tell you anything that's not accurate. Apologies for that.
Okay, good plan. And I think that's it. I'm looking at the time. I think we answered as many as we can. I will, Mike, send you the rest of these questions, and if you're able to answer any of them, I can hook you up with the people who asked. And thank you so much, and thank you to your whole team. I know. I hope you're going on vacation after this, or have a little time off. Enjoy a long weekend or something. And thank you so much. There was some really great stuff. I think you can see in the feedback, people were really, really jazzed about what you guys, all the work you guys did. So thank you. And we look forward to seeing you the next time around. And in the meantime, be sure to connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter or X, and LinkedIn. Use the hashtag LAPPG if people are doing such a thing still. And thank you to our partners. Again, platinum level AJ Video Systems. Gold level is Adobe Blackmagic Design, OWC, Zeiss, Frame.io. Silver level is iZotope by Native Instruments, SGO, and Avid. And we have lots of supporting media and community partners as well. And just wanted to let you know we have a ton of videos on our YouTube channel. Please consider subscribing if you have not. That way you'll get notified. I think there's a bell icon you can click, and you'll get notified every time a new one drops. We're pretty current right now. So yeah, we're just going to keep putting them out after we finish our meetings. And this one that I pulled up is from the archives a little bit. It's, I think, from 2017, Sound for Docs with our very own Woodhall, who is here with us through all of his pain. He just had surgery yesterday, but he is our resident audio dude. So we wanted to make sure he was here with us. So thank you, Woody, for being here. I know you're not as comfortable as you normally would be, but we appreciate you being here with us. So with that being said, thanks again, Mike. Thanks to everybody for coming and joining us. We so appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you guys soon and next month.